Welcome to Scaling Sustainability Impact, a Siemens podcast for industry. In it, we are addressing how companies big and small incorporate sustainability into their businesses at speed and scale. While we line up some guests for this new series, we have some previously recorded conversations around sustainability for you to enjoy. This first episode brings together Eryn Devola, our head of sustainability at Siemens Digital Industries, and Dale Tutt, the industry strategy leader at Siemens Digital Industries Software. Let's dive into this conversation on sustainability for industry. So sustainability seems to be an increasingly central part of many companies' strategies for the future. I might ask, why now? What is driving companies of all types and sizes to make sustainability a central focus moving forward?
So I think the first thing is, if you look back in the last 3 to 5 years, we saw a lot of companies making net zero type commitments, which are really great and really noble, but they didn't necessarily have a plan on how to get there. And as you look forward, 2030 and 2040 are not as far away as they once were. So I think companies are now looking to really put focus on the how we get there and put investment behind that. And that's driving it in one angle. The other angle that I see a lot of is governments and governmental agencies are also trying to drive legislation. If you look especially to the European Union, they have released the first 2 of 6 chapters of the EU taxonomy on climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And those chapters in the taxonomy are really about trying to classify products as being relevant to these sustainability topics or not, which is not mandatory. However, coming in fiscal 25, they have what they call the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, which is mandatory for anyone who wants to be doing business in the EU. And this requires companies to have much more transparency on their environmental impacts than what they have today. So I think that that's one of the main things that is driving innovation. On the other side of that, we're seeing investment and capital expenditure driving towards sustainability. This comes, in my view, from one main lever, which is ESG funds, which have been outpacing the market in doubling year over year, if you look back over the last 5 years. The other piece of it, which I think is really interesting in the US, is that we've got the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, which has a lot of incentives in it for sustainability activities within the US. So I think that that's another place that you're having some funding available to help you meet the plans that you've laid out. And I think the third thing, especially as we look at consumer industries, is that we have consumers that are much more aware and really put priority on environmental impacts or the minimization of those impacts, and they're willing to pay a premium for that. So if we look into the food and beverage industries, any consumer products, they are really leading the charge in many ways based on that consumer demand.
Dale, does that kind of drive with what you're seeing at an industry perspective, at an industry level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when, as Eryn described, a lot of the, the changes to the regulatory environment has certainly, driven the need for a lot of companies in a lot of our industries to really shift their focus to how to operate a little bit more sustainable. There certainly is a lot of, I would say, the image piece of it, being a good corporate citizen, but, that both customers and employees want to be associated with companies that are being good stewards and that they have a sustainability plan. And so we see that driving a lot of it. And I think as well that a lot of these companies then see that it becomes a source of competitive advantage, that if you are perceived as, with the right image and that you are getting some of these, these financial benefits, that they've got to start their sustainability journey. They've got to be able to demonstrate more than just saying it, but actually doing it. So I think that really has become a main focus of conversation in boardrooms across the whole world. So it's been it's been a big change over the last 4 or 5 years, where we've really seen a lot more focus now on sustainability.
Dale, I just wanted to add to what you said there a little bit, which I think is really interesting, is that we see companies are really seeing sustainability as being a future license to operate. And we see some of those forerunners and thought leaders trying to do it faster so they can obtain that competitive advantage to get there first. If everyone's going to have to get there eventually, they want to win the race and take any additional share or margin that might be available in the short term.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And surprisingly, the companies that are getting there first are also starting to see the benefits, that they're using less energy, they're producing less waste, and so it becomes almost self-fulfilling at that point in time that you started down the path for one reason, but then you started to see some of the advantages to your competitive position. And so I think a lot of companies then move beyond just talking about it, and that's when they really start to see the benefits of it. And I don't know, I called it once the gift that keeps on giving. At one of my previous jobs, where once we started saving money, it was like, hey, this is actually a pretty good deal. So it works out really well.
So it sounds like that shift in perspective from seeing sustainability as a requirement to seeing the kind of economic benefit of it might be a first step. Are there some other first steps that you're seeing companies take to act on sustainability?
Yeah, I can take this one first. It's just, I think that companies, that for so many years as they've developed new products, they focus a lot on performance or styling or cost of the product. If you're designing airplanes, you might be worrying about the weight of the product, and so you would see that there were a lot of focus on these items. But I think now, as companies are starting to get involved in it, that just really understanding the full scope of what the challenge is. It's what's the information, what are the regulations, and what are they doing in their current systems. And so I think that's one of the biggest first steps that a lot of these companies really struggle with, and how to evaluate their sustainability.
And I think the first steps are actually part often of gaining that bigger, better understanding. And I think something you just said there, Dale, I touch on, is that there's information and there's data that you need that comes from a variety of sources, but there's also requirements and market considerations coming at you from so many different angles. And I think a big part of it is being able to consolidate all of that information down and really understand what your impacts are across your life cycle. So really being able to combine what's going on beyond your gate to gate. And I know for so many years in manufacturing, we would focus on what's coming in our front gate and what's going out our back gate. And now, with what's being required from a governmental perspective in reporting, is you really have to understand the entire life cycle of that product. And that really requires people to be working together and collaborating with their supply chains, with their distribution chains, with their customers in ways that they never really have before.
Yeah. So there's so much information to look at now. So, Eryn, how do companies manage this? It's they already had a lot of data, and they were already optimizing products based on a set of parameters. So, what are your thoughts? How are companies actually overcoming that challenge of just managing this mountain of data now?
Yeah, I said this last year somewhere, and I think about it a lot. Is that we continually design or put together tools that make design engineers' jobs easier, and then we give them more requirements that make it harder again. And it's a kind of continual cycle, right? So I think about that a lot. Really, the best way to ensure sustainability is to design it in. And what you need to then do is have those sustainability requirements, how much CO2 you want to, or you're willing to accept it emitting, how much water you're looking at it being able to use, how far you want it to travel. All of these additional requirements really need to get put into your overall requirements management system the same way you would with a performance requirement, with a size requirement, a weight, a color. All of these are requirements for products moving forward. And, like I said, in a way, I feel bad for those design engineers that we continue to make their job more complicated. However, the good news is we have the tools where we're integrating and able to present these trade-offs. And I think the one phrase that often comes to me, and I think it's a huge challenge for businesses to overcome, is turning data into decisions. And that's what we've been working to do with a lot of our design tools, is to put more and more intelligence into them that allows us to be able to turn those data points into decisions.
Yeah, I'll just add one last piece to that, Eryn. I mean, totally agree with you that characterization. We give them tools and then we give them more work to do. And but all kidding aside, it really is enabling them. These tools are empowering them to be much more innovative and to really consider more and more of these parameters. And so I think that's what's so great about the current opportunities that we have. As digitalization tools really continue to mature and help those engineers to be more productive and to automate some of the administrative tasks, that now it's actually making it much easier to incorporate new requirements such as sustainability, and whether it's reducing carbon usage or overall energy usage or just reducing waste. I think we've in some respects, it's really helping them to be much more innovative and much more creative in solving some of these problems. So I think that's been a pretty good outcome with that, even though we do keep finding new things for them to do.
Right. There's always
keeps them busy.
Right. There's always another angle we're coming at. And I think that one of the concepts that we've been talking a bit about here at Siemens is the idea of collective intelligence, and where, no one entity is going to be able to be fully sustainable. In order to optimize over an entire ecosystem, you have to have the intelligence of that ecosystem. And a lot of that is putting it in those design engineers' hands, but also putting it in those production managers' hands and putting it in those logistics providers' hands and pulling that data together. I think that we see a future where there's a lot more information and data sharing, and people are collaborating in a really different and more fundamental way, looking at an entire value chain optimization rather than optimizing for my gate to gate or your gate to gate, looking at that entire value chain of a product. And I completely appreciate that feels daunting, but I believe that we have the technology that we just need to be able to continue to use and apply to these types of problems.
So the digital twin has to be an important part of this as well, correct? It seems like it's the means by which companies can apply that collective intelligence most effectively. What are your thoughts on the role of the digital twin in the sustainability journey?
It's absolutely imperative. The digital twin is really the basis for being able to bring your real and digital world together, being able to simulate, innovate, try new things. And sustainability is, I don't want to say just another outcome, but it's really just another outcome that you're looking for. You're looking for performance. You're looking for it to meet other requirements. And you need to have a digital twin that is enhanced with these sustainability parameters as well, so you can understand the impacts in your simulations and in your design innovation.
Yeah, I love how she characterized that as just another outcome, but it is so true. And I always tell everybody that the digital twin is so critical for the digital journey and to really develop those new products, because it's the rich, robust understanding of how your product is going to perform, how you're going to build it, and then how you're going to support it out in the field. So now when you start to think about making all these trade-offs and being able to take all this, the data and using collective intelligence to really help optimize those products, you're using that as insights that are being driven into the digital twin to help you make better decisions as you go forward and help you optimize how that product's going to perform, how you're going to build it, and be able to manage all these parameters. And so I think when you think about sustainability in the full context of the product and everything else that you're using to design the product, the performance requirements, the cost requirements, et cetera, and as well, when you start to get into production, how are you going to, what are the different ways you can build it, and how are you going to manage the workflows in your factory? That you have to have the digital twin to really make use of all of that information and this collective intelligence to really drive better decisions. And so it's the foundation of it is a digital twin. You can't do that on paper. You can't do that on just a handful of cases. You need to be able to look at hundreds or thousands of cases to really find those optimal answers that will satisfy all of the requirements for your project.
And I think the one thing that I don't know that we always think enough about is how much simulation tools have allowed us to think bolder and innovate further. I think back to when I first started my engineering career, and you really had to get down to the best, or what you thought were the best, or maybe the most conventional 2 or 3 ideas, because you had to go through all this prototyping and you had timelines and you had costs associated with this. And I think in the area of sustainability, where we have so much innovation that we need to get all the plastic out of the ocean, to really reuse materials and make them circular, having simulation tools that allow you to think bigger and bolder with very little cost and environmental impact helps really breed that environment for active and outside the box innovation.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on that this simulation is critical. And when you have the digital twin and you've built that and you start to use simulation, how you use it throughout the course of your program changes. And early as you're first developing, I got an idea, I want to go do something. As Eryn said, you'd look at maybe a handful of different options. And now because you have the digital twin and you have sustainability, maybe you can look at hundreds of options and you maybe find an answer that's different than what you would have optimized on in the past. But you're able to use that simulation to drive decision making. And you're able to make decisions when you can still influence the direction of the product and your production processes to actually be more sustainable or to operate in with higher performance. Whatever the critical parameters are, you're able to make those decisions when you can still influence the direction of the product. Then as your digital twin and your simulations mature, you can use those to actually optimize those solutions and optimize those designs and use simulation to optimize your production design. And then as you get a little bit further on and you've added more granularity to your simulations and the product's been designed, now you can start to use it for virtual verification. And so you're able to use simulation throughout the product lifecycle. As your product matures, your simulations mature, but also how you use those simulations to either make decisions or optimize your products or verify them changes and matures as well throughout the entire process. So it's a pretty key element of being able to really execute on programs in a more sustainable manner.
Yeah, I think about having to, at least in my past, trying to, while you're still trying to prove the design, make tooling investments and all of these things that you're now able to avoid. And, then once you get locked in, you say, well, I can't change it much more than 10% from what it is. And gosh, it's a great time to be a design engineer.
Yes, it is. I agree with that.
Thank you to the audience for tuning in to part 1 of this discussion on sustainability across industries with Eryn Devola and Dale Tutt. We will be back next week with part 2 as we look into the role of the supplier ecosystem in creating a sustainable product. And until then, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and check out our website with the link in the description.